I don't know what to say. And I'm going to. Good evening, everyone. From coast to coast, and perhaps even beyond that, the Icelandic National League of the United States would like to welcome each of you to tonight's Author's Corner. We are thrilled to welcome two authors who've written books about the Icelandic Yule Lads. Perhaps many of you tonight come from Icelandic families and are already familiar with this uniquely Icelandic tradition. And I suspect some of you will learn about these Icelandic Yule Lads for the very first time tonight. In either case, it's a wonderful tradition that our two authors tonight have become experts in. I hope you'll enjoy the next bit of time with us. Before I introduce each of the authors, I'd like to tell you that we welcome your questions. It's your questions that will create really rich dialogue with our authors in especially the last half hour of our time together. So I encourage you to submit your questions at any time as you think of them from this point forward. And you do so by hovering your cursor over the bottom of your screen. And when you do that, you'll see a Q&A icon down there. If you click on that Q&A icon, you can type in any question that you have, and it'll go into our queue of questions from people like you in the audience. And I'll be checking that queue, and we'll ask those questions at opportune moments in the hour, but mostly kind of in that last half hour. To get things rolling, I am so happy to be able to introduce our two authors for the evening. First, Gay Strandemo is an author and a librarian in Westport, Wisconsin, and began telling the story of the Yule Lads, Jólasveinar, to her children when they were very young, and she continues that tradition every season. She decided in 2018 to publish a book about it, and that book is available for purchase on her website, www.theyuleboys.com. Our second author tonight is Heidi Hermann, and we're really happy to welcome Heidi, who's coming to us tonight from a library, I think, in Arizona. She is the author of 3 different books about the Yule Lads and probably learned about this tradition from her mother, who was born in Iceland. Heidi will tell you about her books over the course of the evening, but they're all available for purchase on Amazon.com. But she's also an award-winning author of other books featuring Iceland that you can learn about on her website, HeidiHermannAuthor.com. She might plug that again later and tell you a little bit more, but we'll see how the Yule Lads play out. So we're going to start off tonight with kind of a broad question that I'm going to ask each of the authors. So let's start off with Gay. Gay, would you please tell us about your book, The Yule Boys, and kind of how it came to be?
I wrote this book, The Yule Boys, and how it came to be is kind of a circuitous kind of story. I didn't grow up with a lot of Icelandic history. My father's side of the family was Norwegian, all Norwegians, so I had quite a lot of Nordic customs, especially out this time of year. But I started getting interested in the Icelandic when I was in the process of writing and producing plays for children for the school district and for a library that I work at. And every summer, if people would sign their kids up, and I would hire teenagers to direct, and we would do a play that we'd rehearse it in a week and put it on. And I would always, I was really drawn to international themes. And one of them was Scandinavian stories. And I started investigating all kinds of Scandinavian stories. And I was in particular wanting to find an Icelandic one because I'm Norwegian, like I said, but I'm also part Icelandic. And in the course of that, I came across the Jólasveinar story and decided that I would do it, do this little custom with my children, my two sons. And they really loved it. We lived in an old 1800s farmhouse at the time, and it was really a lot of fun. And I always made sure that I had a good potato, you know, at some point. And it was during the time of Harry Potter kind of being at the fore. And these magical creatures just kind of moved right into our lives.
Very cool, very cool. So your book is just a year old now, right?
It's just a year old. This is kind of my first marketing season for the Yule, because we got it late last year due to paper shortages, printing problems.
Well, let's shift that same question over to Heidi. Could you tell us a little bit about your book that's called The Legend of the Icelandic Yule Lads?
Yes. Well, my mom is from Iceland, and she spent the first 20 years of her life in Iceland. So she grew up with these, the legend of the Yule Lad and Grila, the hidden folk, the monster worm, all of these things. When she wrote her memoirs of growing up in Iceland, she included all these things, and so many people had questions. And I knew the Yule Lads, but there were so many different levels to the legend, and I started researching to kind of answer more questions. And I happened to be in Iceland. It was 2014, and I was in Iceland, and I got to talking to one of my little cousins there, and I said, you know, the Yule Lads at Christmas time, they used to be like horrible and awful and naughty, and they would come down and steal kids, and Grila would make them into bad kids too, and that was horrible. But now they're just, they make mischief, and they steal things, and they'll leave you little gifts. What happened? What happened that they changed? And in very typical Icelandic fashion, this little 5-year-old just went, they just did. Just very accepting of that. And I thought, you know what? I am half American, half Icelandic. So the American part of me needs the story. I need to know what happened. Where's the story? So that is what my book is, Legend of the Icelandic Yule Lads. And what I do is present a possible scenario of what actually happened to turn these 13 trolls from horrible child-eating ogres to now fun-loving mischief makers who are, they're not exactly bad, they're not good, but they're not really bad. So this is my story.
And we'll get a little glimpse later, I think, into who each of the 13 are, learning a bit about their personalities and their devious behavior. But for now, I just would like to remind the audience that we would love to have your questions flowing in right now. So again, reminder, down at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A icon. Type in any questions as you think of them as we go along. We'd love to have those questions. So Gay, I think I mentioned that when I introduced you that the Yule Lads have kind of become a family tradition. Can you tell us how that tradition's kind of woven into your celebration at Christmas?
Well, but my boys were quite young when I started it out, and I just kept gathering more and more information. I was in grad school at the time and working at the major humanities and social sciences library on campus. And I started trotting up to the special collections where they have the rare books and you put them on a pillow. And so I started finding kind of background on all this, and also some wonderful pictures from these 1800s books. And, you know, I just took these with my phone, but aren't they great? And started getting an idea. Here's, how do you like these guys? Just finding such oddities like the headdress on the woman and everything. And so I started getting very involved with researching this, and started reading some stories of Icelandic travels in the Napoleonic era and things like that. And then around that same time, there was Sigur Rós and Amina, came into play, you know, on the music scene, and that was a wonderful experience as well. This kind of majestic, sweeping song, and sung in Icelandic, and so just kind of snowballed into having the music around and having a party. Then we started having a party for people, you know, our friends and our kids' friends and everything, and started. And kind of, you know, the characters kept going. And then I was also, I keep sending Yule boys to my boys. They don't live here anymore. One's in Colorado and one is in Japan. And just today at the library, I kind of see, I put little bags of candy and things, and then I have a potato too that I put in there.
So your kids really picked up on
today, so I keep it going, and the Japanese love it because my son teaches in a school there, and they just love it. They love it.
That's great. Hey, thanks. So Heidi, can you tell us a little bit about why? I mean, you knew about the Yule Lads, and it was kind of a family tradition, but why write about it? What was the motivation to put it to paper?
I think it was after Mom wrote her memoirs that a lot of the folklore became a little more at the forefront. And I'm going to have to refer to some of my notes, because some of my research that I found, it's just so fascinating to look at it. Like the idea that the Yule Lads over time just kind of became gentler and nicer, and that sort of happened about the way Iceland converted to Christianity. Pretty much overnight, you know, they pretty much decided that they didn't want to have a holy war, so everybody converted to Christianity overnight. What you did in your own house was your own business, kind of a don't ask, don't tell. But that's exactly how it was done. And that's pretty much how they did the Yule Lads too. Let's see, it was 1746. Somebody decided that these stories were getting entirely too violent. So they actually have a law decree that said the foolish custom, which has been practiced here and there about the country, of scaring children with the Yuletide lads or ghosts shall be abolished. So once that law came out, they wanted to keep the Yule Lads and keep them as part of the Christmas tradition, but they just had to tone them down and kind of give them a new spin. But you take that with the Yule Cat and with Grila, that Snorri Sturluson actually wrote about her back in 1300. So she's very, very old. She actually shows up in the Faroe Islands as well. So she gets around quite a bit. But the Yule Cat, connecting to Christmas, anyone who doesn't get clothes for Christmas, you can almost follow that back to the sheep shearing in the fall. Anybody who helps out with the shearing would traditionally get a bag of wool, and then you'd have a couple months to work that into new clothes. So obviously, if you didn't have new clothes at Christmas, you were a lazy person and didn't help with the shearing. So, you know, some of this all connects together, and it makes for fascinating folklore. And I can't help sharing it. I love the folklore and the mentality behind it that really sets the stage for what the culture is like and how they approach living and interacting with each other.
That's very cool. Now, I think, Gay, with your book, you did most of your own illustrations. Is that correct?
Except for the map.
Okay. And Heidi, what about your illustrations in your book? Are they yours or somebody?
Oh, no, I worked with a very talented artist up in Portland. She worked on the cover of the original book, the coloring book. We have Christmas ornaments, and she is actually in the process of re-illustrating the original book because we want to put more of the original legend in there. But we had a lot of input from her 7-year-old daughter on what some of the guys should look like and how they ultimately ended up their images. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, before we get into some other questions from the audience, hopefully, I think Heidi's going to read a 1932 poem about the Yule Lads, which will give us a real flavor for who they are and their mischief. And at the same time, we're going to try to show some of the illustrations from Gay's book. So Doug, if you can cue up the PowerPoint on that first Yule Lad, and Heidi, you can introduce the poem to us.
Absolutely. Now, this is going to be from a 1932 poem called Jólasveinar by Johann Kotlum, and he kind of updated all of the Yule Lads for modern times. He used John Arneson's 1862 reference, who harkened back. I think he actually took some stuff from Snorri Sturluson from the 13th century. So this is going to be the updated version, and it has been translated from Icelandic into English, but it gives you a good idea of what the original Yule Lad legend was. And this is after they turned nice. Let me tell the story of the lads of few charms, who once upon a time used to visit our farms. 13 altogether, these gents in their prime didn't want to irk people all at one time. They came from the mountains, as many of you know, in a long single file to the farmsteads below. Creeping up all stealth, they unlocked the door. The kitchen and the pantry they came looking for. Grila was their mother. She gave them ogre milk, and their father, Lapaldi, a loathsome ilk. They hid where they could, with a cunning look or sneer, ready with their pranks when people were not near. They were called the Yuletide Lads. At Yuletide they were due, and always came one by one, not ever two by two. And even when they were seen, they weren't loath to roam. They played their tricks, disturbing the peace of the home. The first of them was Sheepcoat Clod. He came stiff as wood to prey upon the farmer's sheep as far as he could. He wished to suck the ewes. It was no accident. He couldn't. He had stiff knees, not too convenient. The second was Gollygawk. Gray his head and mane, he snuck into the cow barn from his craggy ravine. Hiding in the stalls, he would steal the milk, while the milkmaid gave the cowherd a meaningful smile. Stubby was the third called, a stunted little man, who watched for every chance to whisk off a pan. And scurrying away with it, he scraped off the bits that stuck to the bottom and brims. Those were his favorites. The fourth was Spoonlicker. Like a spindle he was thin. He felt himself in clover when the cook wasn't in. Then stepping up, he grappled the stirring spoon with glee, holding it with both hands, for it was slippery. Pot Scraper, the fifth one, was a funny sort of chap. When kids were giving scrapings, he'd come to the door and tap, and they would rush to see if there really was a guest, and he scurried to the pot and had a scraping fest. Bull Liquor, the sixth one, was shockingly ill-bred. From underneath the bedstead, he would stick his ugly head. And when the bowls were left to be licked by dog or cat, he snatched them from herself. He was sure good at that. The seventh was Door Slammer, a sorry, vulgar chap. When people in twilight would take a little nap, he was happy as a lark with the havoc he could wreak, slamming doors and hearing the hinges on them squeak. Skeer Gobbler, the eighth, was an awful stupid bloke. He lambasted the skeer tub till the lid on it broke. And then he stood there gobbling. His greed was well known, until about to burst he would bleat, howl, and moan. The ninth was Sausage Swiper, a shifty pilferer. He climbed up in the rafters and raided food from there. Sitting on a crossbeam in soot and in smoke, he fed himself on sausage fit for gentlefolk. The 10th was Window Peeper, a weird little twit who stepped up to the window and stole a peek through it. And whatever was inside to which his eye was drawn, he most likely attempted to take later on. The 11th was Door Sniffer, a doltish lad and gross. He never caught a cold, yet had a huge sensitive nose. He caught the scent of lace bread while leagues away still, and ran towards it weightless as wind over dale and hill. Meat Hook, the 12th one, his talent would display as soon as he arrived on St. Thorlax's Day. He snagged himself a morsel of meat of any sort, although his hook at times was just a tiny bit short. The 13th was Candlebeggar. 'Twas cold, I believe, if he was not the last of the lot on Christmas Eve. He trailed after little ones who, like happy sprites, ran about the farm with their fine tallow lights. On Christmas night itself, so a wise man writes, the lads were all restrained and just stared at the lights. Then one by one they trotted off into the frost and snow. On 12th night, the last of the lads used to go. Their footprints in the highlands are effaced now for long. The memories have all turned to image and to song.
Wow, that was great. Thank you, Heidi, for sharing that almost 100-year-old poem. That's great. It is really interesting to see how they have become a little more innocent, not quite so criminal. And I was wondering, you know, they have kind of a rather devious reputation, but they also kind of are adorable in a kind of a new way. Do you have a favorite Yule lad, Heidi? And if so, why do you like that particular lad?
Well, I would say that the one I probably connect with the most is Door Sniffer, because he's got this huge nose so he can sniff out the treats. And if it comes to cakes and cookies and that, I mean, that's the guy I want to hang out with, because if he can find the goodies. But I know in recent times, Jessica, my artist, she did such an adorable job on Sausage Swiper that as far as the guys being cute, he's my favorite just because I think my version of him is so cute.
So did your mother like tell stories about like things that would happen at these particular nights along the way? Like would the skier in the refrigerator be missing the next morning?
A little bit, because, you know, she says in Iceland, you can't ever say you don't believe. So, you know, you have to believe. So if there's any, you know, thumps or bumps in the night, you know, that's door slam, right? I'm not quite sure what you do if the thumps and bumps arrive early, but yeah, you build it into your tradition. I'm sure, Gay, you've done that quite a bit, building that into daily traditions of the holiday season.
Oh yes, yes, and I've got all the Norwegian ones as well. But yeah.
So, Gay, do you have a favorite?
Well, you know, I think my favorite is the skier Robert, because I'm quite fond of that skier.
Now, how about your kids? Were they like, did they like a particular one?
Well, in my drawings, which are kind of, you know, I haven't been to Iceland, so I've taken liberties with how they look, and have modernized them and made them younger. They love pot liquor. Everybody loves pot liquor, just because it always got that kind of plumber's pants.
Well, we've got some questions that have come in from the audience, so let's see if we can kind of stroll through them. And two of them actually are kind of on the same interesting topic. So both of these people that ask questions talk about the transition of these stories to North America, and they say that their immigrant communities didn't really carry these stories forward. Do you know anything about maybe why they died out with many of the immigrant families? Because Or have you heard that? Heidi, any idea on that history piece?
Well, in the different clubs and associations, because I attend quite a few Scandinavian festival, and I do presentations on the Yule Lads for different clubs. And I know the Icelandic club, I believe it's in Gimli or Winnipeg. I think it's Gimli. They have a full set of Yule Lad puppets that they use regularly in their events. And I think that a lot of the clubs that have supported the immigrants in the second and third generation, when they really work to have like a Thorablat dinner and some of the traditional things, that's where some of this comes in. But I know for my mom, there were a number of years, she was born and raised in Iceland and came to the United States right at World War II. My father was an American in the Navy. So she was a war bride. And for those that immigrated during that time period, there was kind of an environment where you felt like you needed to acclimate to America, and they didn't really encourage a lot of the old traditions or language of that to be around. So maybe on some of those, they adapted Santa Claus. Of course, if you think about it, I think depending on how you look at it, I love it, because if you're good, Santa will bring you presents. So it's a nice safety thing. It's real easy for kids to adapt to that. But on the flip side, with the Yule Lads, in a way, it kind of sets the bar low. You don't have to be good. You just have to not be bad. I mean, that's if you're bad, you get a rotten potato. But if you're just not bad, you get a gift in your shoe. So by the time Christmas Day arrives, you've already got 13 gifts. So between the two of those things, if I had a choice, I think I'd go with the Yule Lads rather than waiting for Santa.
That's a really interesting analysis, because a lot of the immigrants from the 1870s through the early 1900s felt compelled to comply with the majority culture around them, and they changed their names and they forbid their kids from speaking the language. And yeah, perhaps that might be an answer to the question that was raised. Mm-hmm. But how can we then bring those traditions back to life? That's the question. They're old traditions. They might not have been around for a couple of generations, but
I think there's room for all of them, because if we can have Santa Claus and the Grinch and Elf on the Shelf and Olaf, I think the Yule Lads have a spot in there too. I think there's room.
Gay, any thoughts on?
Oh, well, anyone I've introduced them to, they're happy to go along with it. I mean, there's so humor. So it's very appealing to people. I think that's kind of what caught me up in it in the first place too. All the humor that.
That's great. So another question from our audience is, they really love the nice, soft, touchy-feely Yule Lads of today. But do either of you have any ideas, or do you know of any books that really give us the non-sanitized version, the gruesome old original Yule Lads and Trolls? Are those stories out there?
The truly gruesome ones actually were never really the Yule Lads. It was Grila. So Grila was the one who actually made Bad Kids Stew, and she sort of forced the lads to find the children. And if you go back, like I said, Snorri Sturluson actually wrote about Grila and in the Faroe Islands, and there's actually a very similar folklore in Ireland that has a striking resemblance to Grila. And let's see, we have, I believe she was connected in the 17th century as part of winter solstice, because she had this stick that as she walked, everywhere she touched would then turn to snow and ice. And that's sort of how she got associated with that. Me personally, I would always like to think that it had something to do with the midnight sun, because, you know, trolls can't go out in the sunlight because they turn to rock. So it makes sense that they would be active in the winter, but apparently it has something more to do with the summer solstice. So some of those really gruesome tales, I would say go back to Grila, and she would probably give you some of that you're looking for.
Thanks. You know, I think both of you talked about having to use your imagination as authors to kind of speculate on some of the story. At least some of the illustrations were, you know, kind of in your imagination. How about this as a question? Can you speculate and tell us what you think the Yule Lads do the rest of the year when they're not like causing trouble during the holidays? Where are they? What do they do?
Well, they live in Dimmaborger. So they live up near Lake Nivat. I don't know. I guess we're going to have to write some more stories on what they do. I know in one of my second story, I felt like they needed to venture to America, and they came to the Icelandic Food Festival in New York. And then I kind of had them causing havoc at the North Pole. But I think they can pretty much go wherever they want to.
Magical creatures.
Right.
Magic creatures, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have any thoughts about where they hang out, Gay?
Well, they live in a cave, and I should think that maybe they try to have some fun and geysers and dropping down volcanoes and spelunking and swimming and just kind of making use of all the loot they gather from.
We had one question come in one questioner noted, Gay, that this is your first book. So first of all, congratulations on becoming a published author, but what did you feel you had to do personally to prepare to write your first book? Did you take any writing or publishing classes?
No, I didn't. I have one of my degrees from undergrad is in art, and I was mostly involved with theater after I graduated. So it was just relaxing for me. I just decided, you know, I'm gonna do this. And so on my day off, I would just draw probably one character a week. And so that part of it, you know, not stressful. And when it came to the actual publishing, I decided to self-publish, and my husband has a lot to do with that too, because he shoots video and he's really kind of facile with all these programs. And so he set that up, and we have a company and got a printer in Minnesota. And the thing is, I self-published for a couple of reasons, because when you try to get a major publisher to publish something, they want either text or illustrations, not both. And I just saw no point to that and didn't see how that could work. So that's how we came to self-publish. And it was a kind of a lot of rigmarole, because you have to have certain formats going for you, and you have to have certain placement. It really, I did learn a lot. I learned a lot about publishing.
Very nice, thanks. So somebody wrote in with an interesting statement, not necessarily a question, but their history with this in their family. He says, my great-grandmother used to tell Icelandic stories to my mother. So this was a grandmother talking to his mother. When she was young, the stories scared her so much that she would hide when my great-grandmother would tell these stories. And to this day, mother hates trolls and does not want anything to do with them. I shared Heidi's book last year with my family. My mother still does not want to hear about troll stories.
I wouldn't blame her, because when I read the first story about Grila, and that she has 100 tails and a bag on each tail that held 10 children per bag, and she has cloven feet and 10 ears on either side of her head so she can hear the complaints of children and, you know, go down and steal them. And I just thought it was so horrible, and just all the visuals, and yeah, I did.
So you've mentioned a couple of times tonight that the mother of these 13 lads was Grila, and she wasn't a very pleasant person either, it doesn't appear. Let's expand the conversation to other Icelandic stories or traditions or holiday foods, customs, things that you've incorporated in your families. But can you expand a little bit about the story of Grila and the cat?
The Grila is presented as an ogress. So she's an ogre, and her offspring are trolls. And of her third husband. The cat is her pet, and so the Christmas cat basically stalks down at Christmas time and looks for people who didn't get new clothes. And Grila is mainly, you know, looking for bad kids that she's sort of been, and I find it interesting that it's almost like Santa Claus, where she's been keeping a list, you know, because she listens all year long, but she waits until Christmas time before she comes down and starts snatching kids, you know. I found it interesting that, and maybe this, now that I'm thinking of, maybe this has something to do with why immigrants kind of switched to Santa Claus in that. My mom used to tell us that the Christmas was actually the whole season of going around and visiting and having coffee and pastries and special cakes during the holidays until you came to New Year or Christmas Eve. At 6 p.m., all the church bells would ring and you would go to church. And so even that is a tradition that we had. I used to find church bells on my phone. So we would go out to dinner and we would find the church bells and we would have the church bells go off at 6 p.m. And then and someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe it's also Christmas Eve where you have the tradition of going to the cemeteries and lighting the candles. And some of the photos, I've never actually been to Iceland during Christmas for this, but all the candles are lit on the graves of all your ancestors. Traditionally, you get one gift at Christmas Eve that you open, and a lot of times it's a book. It's where our Christmas book flood comes from. And of course, that tradition didn't actually start until World War II. And then Christmas Day is spent reading your new book and eating chocolates and gradually saying goodbye one by one to the Yule Lads. And I personally think that's another nod to how they converted to Christianity, because the Yule Lads all leave one by one and they all are gone on Three Kings Day, which is January 6th. Could be an accident. I don't know.
Grila kind of reminds me of the monster in Beowulf.
Yes.
So Heidi, you've got 3 books, and I think one of them is like a coloring book. Is that correct?
On the Yule Lads, yeah, one of them's a coloring book that has a couple of short stories. I have a theme. I intended at some point in time to finish it. In my collection of folklore, I have a story in there about Grila and the Christmas cat. And in that story, I present her, Grila, as a Seth witch. Now, Seth witch is unique to Icelandic culture, and it is a very powerful sorceress. And so in my interpretation of Grila, I think maybe for my own personal tone her scariness down, she has woven magic into the fabric, and she has a hood that she wears. And that's why everybody's so terrified by her appearance, because it's this magical spell. So then I put another short story in the coloring book where the Yule Lads, in order to ensure that Grila stops terrorizing people, they stole her magic spindle. So she can no longer spin her magic cloth. And that's why nobody today sees Grila anymore, because she's out there. She's just not hideous looking anymore because she doesn't have her magic.
Thanks for sharing that tradition about the candles on the headstones. That sounds pretty awesome. But that other tradition of book reading and book giving at the holidays is a really high level educational one versus, you know, just opening up presents and throwing boxes around the living room. So I would just suggest that these books that you've written might make really great Christmas gifts, especially for children that are in your family that don't have much background knowledge on the Yule Lads. And coloring book would be perfect for kids that even can't read. So if you're listening and you're thinking of some Christmas gift gaps that you've got on your list, think of these.
I'm actually, next week, I'm launching a new website, YuleLadsLegend.com. And on that, I've dedicated an entire page to all of the books that I could find about the Yule Lads, Grila. I found a wonderful series on the Christmas cat and all of his adventures. But I think I have 25 books by other authors that just kind of pull all that collection together. So yeah, we should definitely encourage more kids to know and understand more of the mythology from Iceland.
Nice. Well, this is your first book, Gay, but I'm wondering from both of you, do you have another book jostling around in your head that you want to get down on paper and published, whether it's on the Yule Lads or something else?
Well, you know, I'm thinking kind of maybe other sorts of projects, more to do with scripts.
Okay.
And I also, if I do another book, I think it'll probably, as I tend to do, kind of another international theme, perhaps Japan, because I'm quite taken with it.
Do you share many of these Icelandic traditions with the patrons at your local library where you work? Do you have bulletin boards with them, or do you have reading corners with this book?
I have had a reading last year in December, and my book is part of the library collection, and it gets around, I tell you, all year long, because it's quite a large library system. So you know, it's got the union catalog and everything, and it goes all over the place. So I guess there's some interest.
So Gay's got some ideas about Japanese scripts. Heidi, what about you?
Oh, I'm working on a lot of projects right now.
Yeah.
I'm actually doing a couple of nonfiction works right now. One day, if I have time, I have one that's rattling around in the back of my head for children, called The Secret Life of Trolls. And it's what you were saying. What do each of the lads do by themselves the rest of the year? But I also have some questions about the Guardians of Iceland. How do they spend their time? And I am absolutely fascinated by the troll. I believe proper pronunciation is Odini, the one that has the bathtub at the southern of Iceland, Rickanes Peninsula. The troll bathtub there. I'm wondering what a troll needs a bathtub for. So I think there's a story there. I think so.
Cool. Well, we don't have any more questions in the queue, and I've run through my list of back pocket questions. So is there anything either of you would like to say to just kind of wrap up? Heidi, where can people follow you most easily to know all of those new books as they evolve?
I have Facebook, Instagram, and a website, Heidi Hermann, author. My Instagram is Stories by Heidi. But the Yule Lads have all of their own social media. Yule Lads Legend, across pretty much every social media platform. Type in Yule Lads Legend and you'll find them.
Okay.
But yeah.
And Gay?
Pretty much the same, the Yule Boys, and mine is the Yule Boys. I kind of wanted to avoid copyright problems with Brian Pinkerton, you know. So, and it's also kind of a little more American a term, so that was kind of deliberate. So I'm the YuleBoys.com and Yule Boys Instagram. It's just the Yule Boys everywhere.
Well, we just got another question in, and it says, I just ordered Heidi's book on Amazon, but I've missed where to get Gay's book. So Gay, can you holler out your website again?
YuleBoys.com.
YuleBoys.com.
It's in 13 stores, and those are also listed on the website.
Nice.
So you can go to some business to a local bookstore.
Well, I think I will.
As a parting comment, I will say I forgot that when we launch the website next week, yuleladlegend.com, I did include an entire page of children's activities on there. So if you want to get any coloring pages or puzzles or all kinds of different activities for kids, there'll be a special page on there for all kinds of free activities for them to download.
Thank you. There's nothing magical about drawing this out to an hour, and we are having 45 minutes of really quality, wonderful discussion. So I'm going to suggest that we kind of wrap it up. And on behalf of our president of the INLUS, Suna, who regrets not being here tonight because of illness, we want to thank the wonderful team of volunteers and our two wonderful speakers tonight, Heidi and Gay. We encourage you to purchase their books, and even though it wouldn't be audible to them, I think they deserve a big round of applause and our immeasurable thanks. So applause, applause, applause. And on a last note, if Suna were here, I'll take this line for her. I would encourage you to consider becoming a member of the INLUS if you're not. We're a fledgling new organization, and you can do so by checking out our website at www.inlus.org. Like I said, we're new, we're only about 5 months old, but already we've launched an educational speaker series and an online Icelandic class. We're into our third week of online Icelandic class with two wonderful women who live in Iceland teaching us. And this Author's Corner is kind of the launch point perhaps of a book club. So we're going to try to read several books throughout the year as a group and come together and talk about them. Of course, Icelandic authors or books about Iceland. So our next educational webinar will be somewhat more than just educational. It's scheduled for December 11th. And we're going to have as our special guest that day, Sfavor Knuther. Maybe many of you know him. He is a musician and expert on prose. He just writes the most meaningful, deep songs. They call him a troubadour. I think that's a great word because that really fits him well. So more will be posted about that event on our webpage and on our Facebook page, and we'll be sending out an email distribution announcing when that's ready to rock and roll. But we've got it scheduled right now for December 12th, so stay tuned. Again, thanks Gay, thanks Heidi, thanks everybody for attending. We wish you all the happiest holidays and find a way to welcome the Yule Lads into your home. Good night.